I've been off and on meds throughout my adult life, and the meds have been for me really helpful. But they kind of keep me at a baseline where if I don't do the other stuff, then there's only so much that the meds can kind of do. And that to me is a thing with depression. Is I'm very firmly convinced there's a very deep spiritual component to it. Because while I believe it's a disease in a sense, there aren't, like, if you have a kidney disease, your kidney disease doesn't give you an overwhelming urge to do things that are terrible to your kidneys. Or like if you have liver disease doesn't give you an uncontrollable urge to binge drink. Whereas depression gives you an uncontrollable urge to do the things that make it so much worse, whether that's sloth, whether that's substance abuse, pornography, like any number, kind of all of that stuff kind of thrown in there. And so I do think there's very much like the devil is able to kind of perceive that weakness in the kind of chemical composition of what's going on there and attack you that way. And that's something I think that people always need to be aware of, that while medicine can be helpful, you have to actually address the deeper underlying issues and do the natural things that God gave you to actually fill your life with meaning and peace. There's a bit I've sort of had for a while. I've done stand-up comedy a couple times, and there's a bit I was kind of developing in my mind talking to other comics. I've done stand-up a couple times. I just go to open mic nights, and I've had people in my congregation say, like, oh, tell us when you're going out. And I go, no, I'm not. I won't.
Yeah.
Because there will be other comics, and I will not say swear words, and I will not talk about the most horrific things on earth, but they will.
Yeah.
and I don't want you to sit through a whole night of that to watch me do 3 minutes of material.
Isn't there something like depression is higher in comics? Like,
oh yeah. Well, and this is right. This is what I'm getting to, is that these guys get up and they all talk about how they have mental illness, right? And then they talk about how they watch porn all day and smoke pot all day and never exercise, and you're going, no, that's not mental illness. That's your brain is actually functioning properly. Like the reason you feel bad is not because you have a mental disease. The reason you feel bad is because your life is terrible. And it should make you feel bad. Like in the same way that if I threw fire in your face and it burned your skin, you wouldn't go, like, I have a sickness with my epidermis.
Yeah.
You go, no, that's actually healthy. If I threw fire at you and your skin didn't react to it, then you would go, oh, there's something wrong. I immediately need to go see a doctor. So in the same way that, like, if you're doing stuff that just nukes your brain chemistry and fills your heart with sorrow, even if you can't properly understand it, that's your brain is actually responding the way it should to you being mean to your brain. So to me, I mean, I don't know if this is the clinical definition or not, but for me, mental illness is better understood as you're actually doing the things that you should be doing. And yet your brain is rebelling against that and filling you with all kinds of sorrow and despair. Like, so I've heard people talk this way about where they'll say things like, after my dad died, I just slipped into a really bad depression. And you're going, no, that's grief. That's how you're supposed to feel. Like you would be very mentally ill if you just shrugged off your dad dying.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, well, anyways, but back to the old grind, and and it didn't bother you anymore. That's mental illness.
Yeah.
But being completely consumed by grief over a thing that should fill you with grief is not. It doesn't mean there's not obviously behaviors and things that you should do to help yourself out in that situation. But this idea of kind of treating your brain as though there's something going wrong with it when it reacts to the mean things that you're doing to it is, we have to have I think you just have to have a better understanding of what mental health struggles actually are. It seemed to me that kind of culturally we were sort of over the target for about 5 minutes. where it used to be like, hey, if you're struggling with depression, don't ever tell anyone that, and we'll just all assume that your faith is weak and you're and you just don't believe in Jesus enough. And then we went, oh, yeah, that's not the problem. Let's not talk that way, and let's not indicate to people that's the issue. But then all of a sudden it went to, if you have a mental illness, you're not accountable for anything, which incentivizes people to view themselves that way. And then also it treats sadness or grief or sorrow as an infection, as opposed to, well, no, I mean, there's a theological sense in which we can say that, like, you weren't created to feel this way. But in terms of like living in the fallen world, no, you should actually feel bad when terrible things happen, and you should feel bad and you should feel worthless when you're doing things that make you worthless, and when you're doing things that alienate you from God and that hurt the people that you love. Like, you're not supposed to feel good about yourself. Yeah. So if you're not accomplishing anything, you're watching TV and smoking pot all day, like, you should feel like a loser, because that's loser behavior, and that's not what you're created to do. And you shouldn't expect to find validation or peace in living that way.
It seems like there's an aspect too there, as you're talking, like some of it's going to be internal, like things that you're doing, but some of it's just going to be you're encountering external evil throughout your life. Right. So if you're rightly calibrated, like, as you see things that are wrong or you hear things that are wrong and whatnot, like, that should have some kind of effect on you. Right. And if it doesn't, that's the deeper issue. Right.
Yeah. And obviously we need to be wise and winsome and in terms of how we help people deal with that. And we shouldn't treat it as though, like, we'll just walk it off. Right. But the idea that there's something fundamentally wrong with you, or that you have a disease or kind of a faulty wiring when you're responding to foreign elements in ways that's actually the way that your brain should respond to them, is an enormous failure to really understand what we're dealing with in that regard.
Yeah.